Hey, everybody. Thank you for jumping in for the midweek moment this week. And been looking forward to spending some time with you all week long. Had a great time last week talking about the subject of attitude. And I want to pick up where we left off last week. So if you have a Bible, you can look in the book of Philippians. We're going to be in chapter 2. Last week we looked at chapter 2, verse number 1. Tonight we're going to look at chapter 2, verse number 2. The reason we're talking about attitude is because attitude is important. It really is. I came across a quote the other day, and it goes something like this. William James said this: "The greatest discovery of my generation is that a man can alter his life simply by altering his attitude." That is so powerful. A man can alter his life simply by altering his attitude. So we're talking about the importance of attitude. And if you were with us last week, remember I said that attitude is a choice. We choose our attitude. We choose if we're going to see the glass half empty or the glass half full. And our attitude in life can be affected by the people in our life and certainly by the circumstances that we're experiencing in our life. People can rob us of joy or give us joy. Circumstances can rob us of joy, or we can experience joy in spite of our circumstances. So let's look at it tonight, and if you haven't hit the share button, go ahead and hit it, because we want people to hear about this, because attitude is so vitally important. Here we go, chapter 2, verse number 2. Paul said, "Make my joy complete by being of the same mind, maintaining the same love, united in spirit and intent on one purpose." So again, just for the sake of review, Paul is writing a letter to the Philippian church, and he's writing as he's incarcerated in a Roman prison. And in spite of his bad circumstances, in spite of the fact that people were on the outside trying to undermine him, trying to destroy his credibility, trying to destroy his reputation, Paul still found joy. Somehow he was able to find joy. Now, we know that he found joy in his relationship with Jesus Christ, because Jesus is the source of our joy, all right? But he also found joy through people like the Philippian believers who prayed for him, who believed in him, who stood with him through his difficult time. And so notice what he said, "Make my joy complete." So Paul was drawing joy from them. This is how we have joy in our own life, and this is how we bring joy into other people's lives. And if there's anything we need today in our world, it is more joy. So notice here that Paul gives these people a challenge, all right? First he says, love each other. If you want to have joy, love each other. When I watch you love each other, Paul is saying, I find joy in my life. You know why? Because love never fails. When we read about love, Paul tells us that love is patient and kind. Love is not arrogant. Love forgives when it's offended. There is a tremendous power in love. We know that love is a fruit of the Spirit. We know that joy is a fruit of the Spirit. So Paul said, if you want to have joy in your life, love other people. And then he says, live in unity. Unity is so important. I think as we learn to love people, we're able to live in unity with people. Now, let's not mistake unity with uniformity. It's not uniformity. We're not all going to become clones. We're not all going to dress alike and look alike and listen to the same kind of music and like the same kind of food and agree on everything. That's not what unity is. Doesn't mean we're robots. Doesn't mean we're clones. It means in spite of our differences and our diversity, that we don't allow those things to divide us. We don't allow those things to push us apart, okay? That's what unity is. So he said, learn to love each other. Learn to live in unity. Now, how are we going to do that if we have all of these differences? Well, he tells us, be intent on one purpose. That's how we accomplish it. Well, if you're going to have joy, you need to learn to love people. You need to learn to live in unity with people. And we can do that if we're intent on one purpose. And From a biblical perspective, from the perspective of Christianity and being a follower of Christ, the one purpose, the highest purpose in our life is to reflect Jesus Christ to the world. The highest purpose in our life is to be salt and light. The highest purpose in our life is to share the good news, which is Jesus was crucified, buried, and raised from the dead to provide forgiveness for us. Okay? It's not about my agenda. It's not about your agenda. It's about His agenda. So Paul is telling them here, it's not about personal agendas. If you want to have joy in your life, and if you want to bring joy into my life, Paul was saying to these believers, keep loving each other, keep walking in unity, and you can do that if you're focused on one purpose. Okay? It's not a political agenda, it's a spiritual agenda. And for us, that should be the highest priority of our life. And then in verse 3, he tells them and tells us how to do this. He said, do nothing from selfishness or empty conceit, but with humility of mind, regard one another as more important than yourselves. So how do I love people? How do I walk in unity with people who differ from me or differ in ideas? How do I focus on one purpose? Well, he tells us, refuse to be selfish. Can't be selfish and have joy. Let me say it again. You can't have a selfish attitude and have a joyful attitude. You can't have a selfish attitude and please the Lord. You can't have a selfish attitude and bring joy to other people or have joy in your own life. Now, I'm going to tell you, I have a lot of weaknesses in my life. I have things that I struggle with, as you have things that you struggle with. But one of the things that really bothers me is selfish people. I just don't understand being selfish. When God has been so generous to us, when God has blessed us so abundantly, how can we be selfish with our time and selfish with our talent and selfish with our finances? If we're intent on fulfilling one purpose, the purpose of Christ, then we should be the most unselfish people in the world. And what I've noticed with selfish people is they're usually critical, they're usually self-righteous, and they're usually miserable. Selfish people are not joyful people. So Paul said, if you want to fulfill these things and have joy in your life, refuse to be selfish. Number 2, refuse to be conceited. Selfish people are usually conceited people. And I think it works like this. Selfishness is the attitude of what's in it for me. And being conceited is the attitude of it's all about me. What's in it for me, and it's all about me. Me, myself, and I. Selfish people are usually conceited people, often vain people, smug people, and arrogant people. And Paul said you're not going to have joy in your life because you're not going to be able to love people, you're not going to be able to walk in unity with people, and you can never fulfill the one purpose that God wants us to fulfill if we're selfish or conceited. And I think James addresses that. The Bible addresses that throughout Scripture. But James said in James 4:6 that God is opposed to the proud, but gives grace to the humble. So when we come off as being selfish and we come off as being conceited and arrogant, God says, hold on just a second. I can't bless that. I can't reward you with joy and peace. No. You need to humble yourself. And then thirdly, and last of all, he said, recognize the worth of other people. Look at verse 3 and 4. Paul said, with humility of mind, regard one another as more important than yourselves. Do not merely look out for your own personal interest, but also for the interest of others. Paul is telling us that if you want to have joy in your life, then start recognizing the value and the worth of other people. Even though they're different, even though they think different, still God has placed value and worth on those people. Recognize the worth. Take an interest in other people. When we're selfish and conceited, again, it's all about me. I'm all wrapped up in myself. When I'm selfish and conceited, I'm not thinking about other people. I'm thinking about myself. But when I only think about myself, what happens is I don't have joy in my life. Somebody once said that somebody that's all wrapped up with themselves makes a really small package. God didn't create us to be small. He created us to be big, to live large for Him. So Paul said we need to take an interest in other people, encourage other people, listen to other people, pray for other people, be willing to serve other people, humble yourself. But what about me? If I do that, am I saying that I'm not of any value? No. No, you still have value. You can value others and take an interest in others. Well, who's going to take an interest in me? Here's how it works. When I take an interest in somebody else, God makes sure that somebody else takes an interest in me. It's called reaping and sowing. We sow and we reap. When we are concerned with other people, God sends people along that are concerned with us. So it doesn't mean you put yourself down. It just means that we treat others the way that we want to be treated. And really, what Paul is talking about here are kingdom principles, okay? Kingdom principles. What he's talking about here is a biblical paradox. You know, you read paradoxes in the Bible. Things like, if you want to live, you have to die to yourself. That's a paradox. You have to humble yourself if God is going to exalt you and promote you and advance you. That's a paradox. He tells us that we must give, and it will be given back to us, pressed down, shaken together, and running over. That's a paradox. And here he's saying, if you take an interest in other people, if you are willing to serve other people, if you're willing to bless other people, then what's going to happen is I'm going to bless you. And part of that blessing is the joy of the Lord, which is our strength. So Paul gives this church and gives us some really, really sound advice on how to develop the right kind of attitude. The right kind of attitude. All right? Remember, we control our attitude. We choose if we're going to be positive or negative. We choose if we're going to have a Christ-like attitude or a selfish attitude. Now, we're going to talk more about this next week, and we're going to be looking at the attitude that Jesus had. So let's work on it this week, okay? Love, unity, a higher purpose, no more selfishness, no more being conceited, and open your eyes and recognize other people, okay? Love you, appreciate you. Hope to see you this Sunday, and if not, I'll see you next week at the Midweek Moment. Take care.